Every single time you switch your attention away from a complex task, just to check a seemingly harmless text message or a Slack notification, it takes your brain an average of 23 minutes to fully regain its previous level of focus.
Right, 23 minutes. It's just wild.
It really is, 23 minutes. So if you're glancing at your phone just 3 times an hour, you're existing in this permanent state of cognitive impairment. You are literally never operating at full capacity.
Which is a staggering reality, honestly. And it completely reframes why we all feel so just exhausted at the end of a Friday, yet somehow feel like we didn't actually accomplish anything meaningful.
Exactly. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Consider this your masterclass in reclaiming your brain. We are basically building a complete personalized deep work operating system for you today.
Yeah, and we're pulling from a really massive stack of sources for this. We've got the core concepts of deep work, originally coined by Cal Newport, plus critical reviews of his methods.
Right, and we're pairing that with cognitive neuroscience papers from the Journal of Psychiatry, some implementation guides from Planet Spark and Todoist, and high-performance psychology from the Neural Leadership Institute.
So the goal here is to give you a massive competitive advantage. I mean, in a world that is completely fractured by distraction, the ability to focus is the ultimate arbitrage opportunity for your career.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the first thing we really have to dismantle is this immense guilt people carry around.
Oh, the guilt is huge.
Right. We think our inability to focus is a character flaw. We sit down to write a strategy document, we end up scrolling social media, and we tell ourselves we just lack willpower.
But willpower is the wrong framework entirely, isn't it?
It completely is. Relying on willpower to fight modern distraction is like relying on a piece of paper to stop a bullet. You are fighting biology here.
Yeah, if we look at the research from Dr. Christopher Prescott in the Journal of Psychiatry, he details how our digital ecosystem is engineered around something called variable reinforcement.
Which is fascinating.
It is. It's the exact same psychological mechanism that casinos use to make slot machines addictive.
But how does that actually work in the brain? Because, I mean, I know I don't feel a reward when I see a spam email. I just get annoyed.
Well, that's the trick of it, actually. The dopamine release doesn't primarily happen when you get a reward. It happens in the anticipation of a potential reward.
Oh, wow. So it's about the mystery.
Exactly. When you hear your phone buzz, your brain doesn't know if it's an automated alert or like a career-changing email. That unpredictability spikes your dopamine, creating this relentless biological urge to check.
So your brain's reward circuitry is literally hijacking your prefrontal cortex.
Yes, the exact part of your brain responsible for long-term planning and focus, it just takes over.
Which makes absolute sense of a concept from former Apple and Microsoft executive Linda Stone. She calls our modern baseline continuous partial attention, or CPA.
Right, CPA. It's such a perfect term for it.
It really is. She argues that evolutionarily we developed the ability to scan the horizon for predators, a low-level, always-on alertness.
Just constantly making sure we're safe.
Right. And Stone says we've adapted that survival mechanism for the digital age. We're constantly scanning our environment, email, Slack, notifications, motivated by the fear of missing out.
Which means you half pay attention to everything, so you fully pay attention to nothing.
Exactly. And that evolutionary stress response carries a heavy neurological tax.
This is where Dr. Sophie Leroy's research at the University of Washington on attention residue comes into play. That's that 23-minute statistic you mentioned at the top.
I really want to dig into the mechanism of that, because it sounds almost impossible. If I look at a text for 2 seconds, why does it take my brain half an hour to recover?
Because your brain's working memory has a limited buffer. When you're deep into a complex proposal, you have dozens of variables loaded into that active memory space.
Okay, so it's like RAM on a computer.
Exactly like RAM. When you switch your attention to a text message, your brain has to quickly unload the proposal variables and load the context of the text message. But it doesn't do it cleanly.
So something gets left behind.
Right. An open loop remains. A residue of your attention stays stuck processing the unfinished task. As you switch back and forth, you build up so much attention residue that your cognitive capacity just flatlines.
You're basically running a computer with 100 tabs open until the fan sounds like a jet engine and the system crashes.
That is the perfect analogy. And this is exactly why we have to clearly define what we're aiming for here, which is deep work versus shallow work.
Right, let's define those. Deep work is professional activity performed in a state of distraction-free concentration. It pushes your cognitive capabilities to their absolute limit.
It creates new, irreplaceable value.
Exactly. While shallow work is the opposite. It's the logistical stuff. Replying to a thread, moving a calendar invite, posting a status update. It does not require high-level cognition.
And what's fascinating here is the economic paradox this creates. Because of the dopamine loops and continuous partial attention we just explored, the ability to perform deep work is becoming incredibly rare.
Almost no one is practicing it.
Right. But simultaneously, as we transition deeper into an AI-driven knowledge economy, the ability to master complex information quickly is becoming the single most valuable skill you can possess.
So the market is paying a premium for a skill that the population is actively losing the ability to perform.
Exactly. The economic incentive is massive.
But this brings up a massive practical hurdle. How do we actually fit deep, uninterrupted focus into a chaotic, modern schedule? You can't just tell a client, sorry, I'm deep working when the server goes down.
Right, you'd be fired. And Newport's research acknowledges this by outlining different architectural approaches to scheduling, because one size definitely does not fit all.
Right, there are four main ones, right?
Yes, you have extreme approaches like the monastic philosophy, where you eliminate all shallow obligations entirely. Think of a novelist retreating to a cabin for 6 months.
Must be nice.
Yeah, rarely practical. Then there's the bimodal approach, where you divide your time into huge chunks, maybe dedicating 4 days to shallow work and taking a 3-day weekend entirely off-grid to think, like Bill Gates' famous Think Week.
Which, again, sounds incredibly luxurious.
Yeah.
But let's be real. When you read through critiques of Newport's work, especially from productivity experts like Tiago Forte or reviewers on Goodreads, a massive red flag gets raised.
Yeah, the privilege argument.
Exactly. A lot of this sounds like academic tech bro privilege. If you are a tenured professor like Cal Newport or a famous author, sure, vanish into a cabin.
You have the leverage to do that.
Right. But if you are a mid-level manager at a logistics firm, you can't just ignore your boss's messages for 4 hours. Or what if you're a rising creator? Jonathan Franzen can ignore social media because he's already famous.
It is a vital critique. Deep work cannot be a fantasy reserved for the elite.
And it's not just about keeping your job. It's about opportunity. Tiago Forte points out the power of weak ties. He actually landed a highly prestigious writing residency through a casual connection on a Facebook group.
Which is exactly the kind of light-touch, shallow networking that a strict deep work purist would tell you to eliminate.
Right. Can we really advise people to unilaterally burn their digital bridges?
We can't, and we shouldn't. The synthesis of these opposing views is what Newport calls the craftsman approach to tool selection.
The craftsman approach. I like that.
Yeah, deep work isn't about dogmatic abstinence from the internet or becoming a hermit. It's about intentionality. Think of a carpenter evaluating a power saw.
They don't just use it because it's new.
Exactly. They use it only if its positive impacts on the final product substantially outweigh the risks and costs. You have to choose a scheduling philosophy that fits your actual professional reality and not a fantasy.
So what does that look like for the average knowledge worker if we aren't retreating to a cabin?
It looks like the rhythmic philosophy. This is about making deep work a daily, unbreakable habit. Instead of waiting for a clear schedule, which will never happen, you schedule a specific block of time day in and day out.
Just to remove the friction of decision-making.
Yes. If you are a manager, your job actually includes shallow work. The goal isn't to eliminate coordination. The goal is to tightly contain it so it doesn't bleed into your focused thinking time.
So let's assume we're going to use that rhythmic philosophy. We want to build a daily habit. How do we actually execute this without failing on day 2?
It's harder than it sounds.
Because I have tried just blocking my calendar and it falls apart immediately. Someone schedules over it or I just ignore it.
This is where we turn to the framework developed by PlanetSpark, which breaks down the architecture of a deep work system into 4 practical layers.
Okay, lay them out for me.
Layer 1 is about energy-aware scheduling, specifically time blocks. You need to schedule 90-minute to 2-hour windows, but the mistake people make is fighting their circadian rhythms.
You mean trying to do heavy cognitive lifting at like 3 p.m. after a massive lunch?
Precisely. Your brain's glucose levels and cortisol curves dictate your focus. For most people, peak analytical capacity is mid-morning. You have to align your deep work with your biological peaks.
Okay, so I picked 9 a.m., but here's my admission of failure. I tried this. I blocked the calendar, I closed my door, I put my phone face down on the desk, and my brain felt like it was practically vibrating.
I know exactly what you mean.
I lasted 12 minutes before I checked my email. Why does it physically hurt to try to do this?
Because you failed at the second layer, which is environment design. Neuroscience shows us that the human brain is extraordinarily sensitive to environmental cues.
Wait, but my phone was face down. It was on silent.
Doesn't matter. Having your smartphone sitting on your desk, even if it is face down, even if it is completely powered off, measurably reduces your cognitive capacity.
Even if it's off. How does that make sense?
It's about that cognitive RAM we talked about earlier. Your brain has deeply internalized the phone as an infinite source of variable dopamine. When it is in your visual field, a background process in your brain has to constantly use energy to suppress the urge to pick it up.
Oh man, so it's actively draining my focus just by existing in the room?
Yes. You have to remove it completely, put it in another room, use app blockers on your computer. You have to engineer the physical space so that distraction isn't just a choice you have to resist, but an action that is physically difficult to execute.
That is huge. Okay, so that brings up the third layer, which solves the anxiety of isolation, social scaffolding.
Right, because you can't just vanish without warning.
Exactly. You need an SLA, a service level agreement for your communication. If you vanish for 2 hours, you panic that your colleagues think you're slacking off.
So you set your Slack status, something like, in deep work until 11 a.m. For emergencies, call my cell.
Yes. It sets a boundary, it trains your colleagues to respect your time, and honestly, it shuts off the anxiety loop in your own head.
And that leads directly into the psychological bookends of the practice, which is layer 4.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Layer 4 is entry and exit rituals. Because it's not just about starting, it's about how you finish.
The exit ritual, specifically the shutdown complete routine, is arguably the most powerful mechanism in this entire operating system.
How does that work?
At the end of your workday, you review your tasks, plan tomorrow, close your laptop, and literally say a phrase out loud, something like, shutdown complete.
It sounds slightly ridiculous to say it out loud, I won't lie.
It does, but it relies on a psychological principle called the Zeigarnik effect. Human beings remember uncompleted tasks much better than completed ones.
Oh, I've noticed that. The things I didn't get to just haunt me all night.
Exactly. If you just walk away from your desk, your brain continues to process those uncompleted tasks all evening. That low-level rumination destroys your downtime and ruins your ability to recover for the next day's deep work session.
So the ritual of reviewing the plan and saying the phrase signals to your brain that the open loops are safely captured. It allows your nervous system to cleanly disengage.
That's it, exactly.
But there is still a massive trapdoor right at the beginning of the process. You sit down at 9 a.m., the phone is in the other room, your colleagues know you're busy. What exactly are you supposed to work on?
Right, if you sit there debating your to-do list, you're draining that cognitive RAM again.
Yes. This is why the Planet Spark Guide introduces the task stack filter. Before the session begins, you run your tasks through a brutal filter.
The 3-question filter.
Yeah. Ask yourself, does this task require sustained cognitive effort? Would the output be meaningfully better if I spent 2 uninterrupted hours on it versus 20 fragmented minutes?
And if the answer is no, it's shallow work, kick it out.
Kick it right out. So, you have a worthy task. Your environment is pristine. You start the timer. You expect to feel like a genius.
You expect to just glide right into it.
Exactly. You expect this to feel like surfing a perfect, wave effortless, flowing inspiration, but instead, you feel miserable, you feel agitated, you desperately want to check the news.
And people quit right there.
Why is the actual experience of deep work so deeply uncomfortable?
Because of a fundamental misunderstanding of what deep work actually is. R.J. Kaiser recently analyzed a fascinating discussion between Cal Newport and neuroscientist Andrew Huberman that clarifies this perfectly.
Oh, I love that interview.
Yeah, we all chase this mystical flow state where work feels effortless. But deep work is not necessarily a flow state. Deep work is deliberate practice.
Let's use an analogy here. People think focus is like surfing, but it's actually like lifting heavy weights. When you lift a heavy weight, your muscles burn. You want to put the weight down. It physically hurts.
That is exactly what is happening biologically. When you engage in deliberate practice, when you are pushing your cognitive skills to the absolute limit of your current ability, you are forcing your brain to physically rewire itself.
Rewire itself how?
Neuroglial cells are actively wrapping myelin, which is a fatty tissue, around your neural pathways to make them fire faster and more efficiently. That physical process of myelination registers in your consciousness as friction, frustration, and exhaustion.
So the pain means it's working.
Precisely. Even world-class performers, according to high-performance psychologist Dr. Michael Gervais, are only in a true flow state about 15% of the time.
Only 15%. That's crazy.
So rest of the time, they are engaging in the grueling, uncomfortable friction of deliberate practice. This is why you must treat focus like a physical fitness protocol. You must use progressive overload.
Right. You wouldn't walk into a gym and try to bench press 300 pounds on your first day.
But people try to do a 4-hour deep work block on day one.
And they fail. If your brain is accustomed to continuous partial attention, start with just 45 minutes, then build to 90.
And you must accept that there is a biological ceiling. The research from Anders Ericsson on elite performers, which Newport cites heavily, demonstrates that the human brain cannot sustain more than about 4 hours of genuine, intense, deep work in a single day.
Because you literally run out of glucose and your neural pathways fatigue, which completely reframes the concept of resting. You need downtime, not as a reward, but as a biological necessity.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, your brain requires rest to consolidate the information it just processed. If you focus intensely for 45 minutes, you need a break. But David Rock from the Neuro Leadership Institute is very clear. A break does not mean scrolling TikTok or checking the news.
Because that is just firing up the variable dopamine slot machine again. You aren't resting, you're just switching the type of stimulation.
Exactly. To sustain this level of cognitive output, you have to wean your mind off its addiction to constant novelty. You have to learn how to tolerate boredom.
Tolerate boredom. That is so hard for us now.
It is. But if you cannot stand in line at the grocery store for 5 minutes without pulling out your phone, you will not have the neural discipline to tolerate the friction of a difficult, deep work session.
Newport has a brilliant exercise for this called productive meditation. You take a period where your body is occupied, but your mind is not, like walking the dog or taking a shower, and you focus your attention entirely on a single, well-defined professional problem.
And when your mind inevitably wanders to what you were having for dinner, you gently but firmly bring it back to the problem, over and over.
It's like doing mental push-ups for your executive function. It strengthens your ability to direct your focus internally rather than constantly reacting to external stimuli.
All right, so we have the biology of distraction, we have the architecture of the deep work block, and we understand the psychology of deliberate practice. Now, how do we make this permanent?
Right. How do we ensure this isn't just an inspiring deep dive that you completely forget by next Tuesday?
This is where strategy meets execution. Anjali Sharma, a director of narrative strategy, applies a brilliant corporate framework to this called the 4 Disciplines of Execution, or 4DX.
4DX. It is about treating your personal focus with the same rigor a business applies to a corporate turnaround.
Yes. The core of this, and the part that completely changes the game, is shifting your focus from lag measures to lead measures.
We have to explain the mechanics of this because it absolutely solves the motivation problem.
Okay, so a lag measure is the ultimate goal you are trying to achieve. Publishing a research paper, getting a promotion, launching a new software product. The problem with lag measures is that by the time you measure them, the performance that drove them is already in the past. They lag.
And psychologically, staring at a massive distant goal is demoralizing. It provides no immediate dopamine hit.
Exactly. A lead measure, however, is the specific daily behavior that will drive success on the lag measure. In our operating system, the ultimate lead measure is the number of hours spent in a state of deep work.
Because you have total immediate control over your lead measures. Did you put your phone in the other room and do the 90 minutes today? Yes or no?
When you focus on lead measures, you give yourself an immediate locus of control. You track it visually, literally keeping a scoreboard on your wall where you tally up your deep work hours.
It hacks your reward circuitry. It gives you a sense of victory every single day, regardless of whether the final project is finished yet.
And if you really want to shock your system into alignment with this new operating system, there is the ultimate test, the 30-day digital declutter.
This is terrifying for most people.
Truly terrifying. You delete the social media apps from your phone, you step away from all the network tools that aren't strictly financially necessary for your survival.
You just sit with the withdrawal.
Yes. And after 30 days, you ask yourself 2 brutal questions. Did anyone actually care that I was gone? And would my life have been notably better if I had been using them?
For the vast majority of knowledge workers, the answer to both is a resounding no. It shatters the illusion that constant connectivity is required for success.
It really does.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? It means that in an economy explicitly structured to fragment your attention and commodify your focus, reclaiming your mind is an act of rebellion.
It is your ultimate competitive advantage.
Exactly. By architecting your environment, accepting the agonizing discomfort of deliberate practice, and relentlessly tracking your lead measures, you transition from being busy to being indispensable.
Let's quickly recap the deep work operating system we've built for you today.
Right. Start by accepting that willpower is useless against dopamine loops. Schedule 45-minute to 90-minute blocks aligned with your morning energy peaks.
Leave your phone in a completely different room to free up cognitive RAM.
Tolerate the friction of deliberate practice without fleeing to a distraction.
Execute a clean shutdown, complete ritual every evening to close your cognitive loops.
And focus entirely on tracking the hours you put in your lead measures, rather than obsessing over the final outcome.
Which raises an important question, one that extends far beyond how many emails you send in a day. We've discussed neuroplasticity, the undeniable fact that our brains physically adapt to the demands we place on them.
Right.
If the vast majority of the population spends the next century trapped in shallow, 15-second dopamine loops, constantly reinforcing circuits of distraction, and only a tiny fraction intentionally trains their neural pathways for deep, sustained thought, are we on the verge of a literal cognitive divergence?
It's a chilling thought. Will the ability to focus eventually separate humanity into two entirely different cognitive classes?
And if so, which side of that evolutionary divide do you want your mind to be on?
Think about that the next time you reflexively reach for your phone in an elevator. Because when you finally master this system, you really will get to the end of your week, look back at the massive value you've created, and feel incredibly energized. You will have finally reclaimed your brain.